Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our Ghana webinar hosted by the Electricity Hub. Can you all hear me? All right, thank you. So the topic for the webinar is Empowering Ghana's Future, Driving Climate Action Through Clean Energy Solutions. Introducing our panelists, I'll start with Yom Ama. Yom is an award-winning energy lawyer who advocates for sustainable development in Africa with expertise in energy access, investment arbitration, and downstream electricity. Recognized as the International Bar Association's Outstanding Young Lawyer of the Year in 2022, Yom leverages her legal expertise and leadership to advance equitable and innovative solutions for Africa's energy challenges. She has moderated high-level discussions such as Powering Africa, Electrifying the Continent through Sustainable Energy Solutions, fostering impactful dialogue and collaboration. Yom's background includes extensive experience in international arbitration, particularly in energy-related disputes and advising on investment frameworks within the downstream electricity sector. Committed to energy access, gender equity, and environmental sustainability, she continues to drive transformative initiatives across Africa's energy landscape. Thank you very much, Ms. Young, for joining us.
Thank you, Name. I'm very grateful to be on the panel today.
You're welcome, ma'am. For our second panelist, Thomas Kankam Ajay. Thomas is a climate and energy policy specialist with relevant skills and interdisciplinary experience in research and development in the areas of energy, climate change, private sector development, and public-private partnerships, having engaged with the highest levels of government and duty bearers across the different sectors in Ghana and abroad. He is currently the National Project Coordinator, NPC, for UNEP NDC Action Project, which is focused on implementing Ghana's nationally determined contributions, NDC, under the Paris Climate Agreement in two priority sectors, which are climate smart agriculture and e-mobility using clean energy options. Thank you very much for joining us, Mr. Thomas.
For having me, and happy to see the moderator, Yom Ama Bledus, and also the other participants as well. Thank you very much.
You're welcome, sir. For our third panelist, Victor Tobena Ezewoko. Mr. Victor is the country head for Nigeria and Ghana for Daystar Power. Before joining Daystar, he worked with Sunray Ventures, PwC, and Great Lakes Control and Engineering. He currently sits on the board of Daystar Power Group's Nigerian subsidiary, Daybreak Power Solutions Limited, and is a fellow of the National Institute of Credit Administration, FICA. Victor holds a bachelor's degree in electrical engineering from Michigan State University and a master's in electrical engineering from the University of Maryland, College Park. Thank you very much, Mr. Victor. It's great to have you here.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
You're welcome, sir. For our last panelist this evening is Dr. David Atokwansa. Dr. David is the director of the Bro Hammond Energy Center at the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology, Kumasi in Ghana. He earned his PhD in renewable energy from the NMBU, Norwegian University of Life Sciences, focusing on long-term performance degradation in field-age solar photovoltaic models. His expertise lies in techno-economic assessment and performance monitoring of renewable energy technologies, particularly on solar photovoltaic systems. Dr. Kwanzaa plays a significant role in several prominent energy initiatives. Additionally, he serves on the Governing Council of the Scaling Up Renewable Energy Program, SREP, in a $69 million project, which is funded by the African Development Bank Group, Climate Investment Funds, and Swiss Government Federation. Thank you very much, Dr. Kwanzaa, for joining us.
It's my pleasure. My pleasure, yeah.
You're welcome, sir. So I would love to call Ms. Yom, our moderator this evening, to take us into the discussions for the session. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Name. Just to set the tone for the discussions this evening, we want to actually discuss the fact that Ghana is a signatory to the Paris Agreement, and therefore there are certain obligations they have to perform under international law. And then that is to help us in driving climate action through clean energy solution. And in this discussion, for the dialogue, we'll discuss strategies, challenges, and opportunities in transitioning to renewable energy. We'll also look at actionable insights, policy recommendations, and collaborative ideas to accelerate Ghana's clean energy journey. We'll delve into the need for stakeholder engagement across critical sectors like private-public partnerships to drive climate action in Ghana through clean energy solutions. Finally, we would highlight the importance of grassroots participation in meeting climate action goals. So I'll just like to dive right into the conversation. And my first question is for Thomas. Thomas, please. As I rightly mentioned, we have Ghana as a country has obligations to fulfill under the Paris Agreement since it's a signatory. So I think based on that, Ghana has set ambitious renewable energy targets, but we face unique challenges as a developing nation. So I want to ask you, based on UNEP's experience with similar economies, what policy frameworks and international support mechanisms could Ghana leverage to accelerate its renewable energy adaptation while ensuring energy access for all?
For the question. So yes, like you rightly said, I work with UNEP as the project coordinator for the NDC Action Project. And under that project, as the introduction said, we've tried to achieve some things under climate mitigation and adaptation. But then coming to your substantive question, so yes, the NDC is the nationally determined contributions. It's under the Paris Agreement, and this is a mechanism that allows countries like Ghana to come up with their own self-determined policies or options to which they think they can transition in the climate change fight, so whether it be mitigation or under adaptation. So that is one mechanism Ghana is using, the nationally determined contributions. And then we also have under UNEP, we have what we call the technology needs assessment, which is trying to support countries to also transition in terms of adopting climate technologies that can help them. Because when you talk about the climate change fight, apart from the sustainability issues about environment, the other key thing is also technology. And then from the technology, you go to the business side of it or the financing aspect of it. So these three things will always have to align before a country can really make impact. So UNEP found it important that countries are assessed on their technology needs, and then they needed support to be provided. So that TNA support is being conducted under our UNEP as a research arm, which is known as the UNEP Copenhagen Climate Center, which is in Denmark. So they are leading that effort. But apart from that, the broader UN system also have what we call under the former US Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, the Sustainable Energy for All, which is also trying to promote energy access for all people across the world, especially people in the vulnerable groups and developing countries. So that is also happening. And another thing is also the Loss and Damage Fund. I'm sure you might have heard about it during the last COP especially, which is also trying to mobilize about $1 billion. But currently we have about $750 million in pledges to try to, support countries that have suffered from historical damages of climate change. And also we have the Green Climate Fund, which I'm sure most of us are aware of, which is also an opportunity for developing countries suffering the damages of climate change or who are trying to bring their production systems or their economies can also apply to also take care of that. And lastly, maybe I'll mention the Global Environmental Facility, GEF. GEF is also another opportunity for countries to tap into international funding, which also came up through the COP system, and it also targets the biodiversity in nature and loss and environmental land degradation and all of those things. So yeah, to answer your question, I think these are some of the international mechanisms that are ongoing, and which UNEP is also involved to try to support countries. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas. You actually dove right into my next question. I wanted to ask you how Ghana can better position itself to access the climate financing you just mentioned, like the Green Climate Fund, the Global Environmental Facility, and the Loss and Damage Fund. How can Ghana better position itself to access climate finance and technical assistance through UNEP's initiatives? And I'm asking this particularly for community-level renewable energy projects in rural areas, where it's usually the traditional grid extension, and usually it may not be economically viable.
So I think normally the approach would be that it's financing, no matter how you look at it. So it has to be bankable, right? So the ability for countries to develop bankable projects, to me, is the first thing. And that is why the work UNEP is doing under the technology needs assessment is very important. Then you're able to understand the country's context, the needs, and then also recommend the appropriate solutions for that. So what really has to drive, to answer your question, to drive that effort should be a demand-driven approach to project development or policy proposals. Policy proposals should be more demand-driven so that you're actually addressing the needs of the people, and it's not from a very top-down approach, which the people can relate. In that sense, these projects are not become not viable or even unbankable in the first place. So then, first of all, we have to develop bankable projects, but then the project itself should also be demand-driven, so that there's always that connection and also sustainability at the end of the project. I think that is what would encourage financiers to want to put their money in some of these efforts. And also, generally, the policy environment has to be conducive. The government should be able to come up with incentives and to also come up with other measures that makes it easier for these projects to be implemented. Like you are saying, you are going into places that are not reachable. So from the get-go, the business case is not there. So how do you incentivize a private person or a private capital to be able to want to do this? And then the ability to also to work with our development partners to mobilize grants, because in most of these cases, if you are going to use the traditional capital to invest in these types of projects, it will not work. So you want to also work with all of these international development organizations to mobilize more of grants, which we're able to, de-risk that kind of business case, which will later on attract the following investment from private capital. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was very insightful. Thank you so much, Thomas. So my next question is for you, Victor. So I'm asking, from your on-ground experience in implementing solar solutions in Ghana, what do you see as the most pressing barriers to wider adoption? Is it technical, is it financial or social? And what innovative business models have you found successful in overcoming these challenges?
Perfect. I think it's a great question, right? I think we can find barriers across all aspects, whether it's financial, technical, or even social. In my experience, I think financial has been the largest barrier to entry, because if you look at solar systems, the costs have dropped dramatically over the last decade. But at the same time, it's still really expensive. And if you think of businesses that are surviving with different economic times going on, nobody wants to invest money in something that they will tell you will pay off itself in 5 years or 7 years or even 3 years. They want to see results now. So a lot of times that's the biggest barrier. What models we've employed as Daystar Power to help with this is a lease to own. So instead of having to buy it upfront, we will tell our clients, well, you can get it now, start seeing the benefits, and you just pay it off over time, right? So it takes away that huge burden. But obviously, there's still some other barriers to entry socially. Some people still have doubts whether it could work, whether it can power. You need to create more awareness technically. Not a lot of people are experienced with this in the market, so we're still trying to train and also seeing how things work, especially like combination with the grid or with generators in case there is grid failure at any point in time. But I think the largest barrier we've seen has been financial, and Daystar and other players are finding ways to handle the financing aspect themselves. So a client doesn't need to cough up capital, he doesn't need to take a loan. We as a developer would take on that burden, bring the money up front, and then allow you to enjoy the benefits, and you just pay up over time. I think that has helped the industry grow a bit more, because if you tell somebody you don't have to buy it, you can pay it over time, they're very happy.
Yeah, thank you so much, Victor. But then I'm following up with this question. Given Ghana's high solar potential, but then challenges with the grid stability, how can we better integrate solar systems with energy storage solutions to provide reliable power for both industrial and residential customers? So in this case, what policy supports would make this more feasible?
That's a great question as well. So I think the biggest bottleneck with batteries again is cost, right? Because if you look at the solar system, that's solar and batteries make up maybe more than 50% of the cost. They're still super expensive. They're becoming cheaper, but the costs are still there. So in terms of policy, you need to look for what are ways we can mitigate this. We can actually reduce that. I know that now there are no import duties on solar panels in Ghana, but if we can waive some of those duties as well on the battery side, it will go a long way. Also, if you look at the inverters, because batteries and panels without inverters to convert it from DC to AC and vice versa, you can't really use them, right? So if we can expand the duty exemptions or tax exemptions to some of those key equipment, I think it's go a long way. That way you're supporting the grid. You're also helping people utilize a bit more. That way grid in Ghana, it's a lot more stable than what you have in some of your neighbors like Nigeria, where I'm from. But at least you still see some customers who told you that the trip-offs could affect their equipment. So you don't even need a large-scale system, but just something smaller to help mitigate or a changeover or support. So I guess if we can find ways to reduce or give some exemptions with some of those specific equipment, it could make it a lot more attractive and also foster more adoption. I think those would be some quick low-hanging fruits.
Thank you so much, Victor. I would move on to Dr. Kwanzaa now. So I want to ask you, Doc, how can Ghana strategically leverage public-private partnership, innovative financing, and technology solutions to accelerate its renewable energy transitions whilst balancing economic development and environmental sustainability?
Yeah, thanks a lot, Yom. That's quite a loaded question, but I'll try.
But I can take it. Do you want me to take it in chunks and then?
No, it's fine.
Okay, please go ahead.
Yeah. So there are a number of key terms one would find in there, but I think the key thing is public-private partnership, right? And because we want to accelerate the renewable energy transition, as you put it. I would want to take it a little bit differently. Instead of saying the renewable energy transition, let's just simply say energy transition, because the transition involves a lot more than solar and wind. Okay, so as a background, we've come quite a distance. We've come quite far here in Ghana. Currently, we have about 5,600 or so megawatts of installed capacity, and about half of this comes from private power producer, independent power producers, right? So it shows that something has been done over the past couple of years to attract private capital into the energy sector broadly. Just last week, we had an event at the Energy Commission in Ghana where we were reflecting on 30 years of the power sector reforms. So how have we attracted private capital? We've implemented some reforms. It may not be perfect, but some things have been done. So for instance, generation is now liberalized. If you can approach the authorities as a private guy if you want to invest in there. So that's one of the things that has been done. Governance structures have also been established, right, to govern the power sector. We've had the Energy Commission established as a technical regulator. We have the PURC. The PURC is the Public Utilities Regulatory Commission. They determine, set tariffs and also engage in other regulatory activities. So yeah, institutions have been created. If you look at the fuel sector, I mean, it's now largely private sector driven. You don't need capital from the state before you are able to bring in fuels. So this is how we've done it in the past, and we've made some significant progress. We currently have electricity access at around 88%. So we've made some progress. And going forward on public-private partnerships, Thomas mentioned something about bankability. If you want to attract private capital, the numbers must be correct, right? So because they would have to report to their shareholders, they are looking at return on investment. So I would say some of the strategic things we need to do would be to invest in data. Where is the data that says if I invest in solar, I am going to, make this much in return, right? Where is the data that shows that this is bankable for a financial institution, to want to advance debt, to its clients? So yeah, we need to invest in data. That'll be one of the things. At the Blue Harmon Energy Center, where I am director, we have been conducting some work recently on the experiences of the early movers in large-scale utilities, solar PV utilities. And one of the things we realized is that even for the state-backed entities, acquiring land was not easy at all. Some have to deal with multiple, land-owning families, etc. So in that work, one of the clear recommendations that we made is that the Investment Promotion Center, the Ghana Investment Promotion Center, should work to acquire land banks, to secure land banks. And the state utilities are already doing that. But the Volta River Authority told us they have land, they've acquired land, they are state-backed utilities. Bui Power Authority told us they've acquired lands and they are prepared to engage, private actors, to jointly invest. So yeah, these are some of the thoughts that I would share. But thanks also for taking note of the fact that the economic development is important, just as environmental sustainability is.
Yeah.
So we are taking a balanced approach to this. Yeah. So
Thank
these
you
will
so
be
much.
my remarks. Yes.
Thank
If you
you
have
so
any
much,
follow-up, I'm happy to
Professor.
follow up. Yes.
I'm happy to hear that there's work in progress. And then Ghana is 88% electrified. That's good, nice. That's very good news. Thank you so much. No follow-up questions for you for now.
Okay.
I'll be moving on
Right.
to my next question, and that would be for Thomas. Thomas, are you with us? Can you tell us how UNEP's technical expertise help Ghana develop a comprehensive strategy that integrates climate resilience with renewable energy deployment? I'm saying this particularly in addressing the unique challenges of rural electrification and grid stability in the West African context.
Sorry, I think I was mute. Thank you very
Yeah.
much for the
Please go ahead.
question.
Yeah,
Your
sure.
questions are always loaded. So
You can just take it in parts and then I'll move on and come back to
I'll
you.
take time to break it down. So yeah, so let me just maybe tell you a story of how, for example, the NDC action projects have been able to do this. So we started off with a scoping study on adaptation finance in Ghana, trying to understand how we can mobilize finance for climate adaptation in the country, trying to identify the challenges, the issues. And we came up with about 4 key issues that we thought were barriers to investment in climate adaptation. And the first one was what Doc alluded to about the cost, the issue about the cost of the technology. And then the other issue was also the policy issues around the technology itself and issues of even standardization. There were no standards. So anybody could just wake up and go and bring any type of panel from anywhere in the world. And then maybe after 2 or 3 days or after a week, it breaks down. And that was also not helping with the penetration of the technology, because then it creates doubts about the technology. Because for the farmer in my village somewhere, they don't know where this thing is coming from. What they know is they got solar and they work. So that scoping study actually helped us to identify those issues. And then the third issue was also the issue of financing. I've mentioned cost, I've mentioned policy and standardization, but then the other issue was also financing, because the existing financing was not appropriate for the kind of penetration we wanted as a country. So something also had to be done around that. And then the last issue was around the issue of the use and maintenance of the solar, in this case, solar power irrigation for smallholder farmers. And we realized that, I mean, solar power irrigation is not like a new thing in Ghana. It has been happening since the 90s to the early 2000s. It's not really new. But then what we realized was that most of these farmers didn't know how to use the technology or even maintain it. So normally it comes in the form of projects. So after the project ends, then everybody abandons the infrastructure and that kind of thing. So we decided to support the country to try and address that. So we spoke to our sister agency, CTCN. They have a fund called AFCIA, the Adaptation Fund Climate Innovation Accelerator Fund, which they give us about 250,000 cedis, no, USD, to try to address these 4 issues I spoke about. And we engage with the consultants, and they've come up with several business models which the country can adopt. And we are working with the Ghana Irrigation Development Authority, the Ministry of Food and Agriculture, and then some smallholder farmers, the Peasant Farmers Association and Women Farmers Association, and a host of other stakeholders, and including the EPA and MESTI, to try to see how we can address these 4 issues. So first, we need to develop a policy instrument around solar power, and then also come up with bankable business models, which the banks will be willing to finance in the first place, so that the issue of access can be addressed. So that was also done. And then also to kind of come up with demonstration projects, because the best way of learning is by doing. So how can we build demonstration projects for these farmers to actually have a hands-on experience with the solar power irrigation system and all of these things? So we've done much of the work, but there's still a few parts to be done in terms of the demonstration projects and all. So this is what UNEP has been doing so far. And under the NDC Action Project itself also, we've also worked with the ministry and GIDA, like I mentioned, to also develop an investment plan, because Dr. David mentioned the GIPCS, because when any investor comes into the country and they want to invest, they want to know what's the country's direction and policy around the sector they want to enter. And for a long time, there was nothing around solar power irrigation, especially because despite its popularity and all of it, there's no clear policy direction around it. So we decided to develop an investment plan with the Ministry of Agric and then GIDA to try to mobilize some financing or create certainty around the whole thing. Because one of the reasons why the banks are charging so much is because of also the risk factors, which is because also there's no policy direction in the first place. And then because one government comes is one district, one something, another government will come, it will be something else. So what is the real direction of the country in that sector? So when you're able to create that kind of predictability, then it also reduces the cost of finance, because you have reduced the risk perception. So that's how that logic flows. So we've tried to develop that investment plan, and we are saying that by 2060, we should be able to mobilize about $3.2 billion to irrigate about 72,000 hectares of farmland, irrigable farmland in the country. Because according to GIDA documents or the Ghana government documents, Ghana has about 72,000 hectares of irrigable land. And we are saying that if we put in place the structures and the recommendations we are proposing, we could mobilize about 3.2 billion to be able to do that. And that will only require an annual investment of about $50 million. So these are some of the things we are doing to try to direct the environment to also make it easier for the country to attract climate finance. Yeah. So
thank you so much. What you are doing with UNEP is so impressive. And we are happy to hear that you are working in collaboration with governments as well. It's really impressive. Thank you. I would move on to my next question. Victor, can you please share with us what the most pressing operational challenges you have faced in scaling solar adoption in Ghana based on your on-ground experience in the country? And also, I want to know what specific regulatory or policy changes would make the market grow faster whilst maintaining quality standards, which is very important.
Perfect. Yeah. So I guess it's always tricky when you want to suggest regulatory changes. First things first, you have to appreciate the current regulatory landscape and how supportive they are of companies like Daystar, other companies in the market and trying to grow. I would say one of the biggest regulatory changes that I think would have a lot of impact would be the ease of doing a PPA, right? We talked about the financial barrier at the start. So now instead of selling, you can do a lease to own, but there are companies who would prefer to just be able to sign a contract and pay for what they consume and see the benefits. But to do that now is not the most straightforward process. You need to already have an agreement in place. You have to apply for extra licenses. There's a lot that goes into it versus in some other markets where you can sign a PPA immediately and start seeing the benefits. I think if we actually enable that, the market would grow a lot, right? Because a lot of times, a lot of companies that may not have the best luck raising finances or doing everything, they're stuck because any system they have to sell it to make their money back. They're not able to think long-term of a lease that allows them to recoup the money over time. So the people who want to provide the services are limited. And then the customers are limited because the option is either to buy or at least to own. And if somebody just wants to PPA, it might not really work or it might defeat the spirit. So I think that's something that could go a long way. In terms of operational challenges, another one would be, and we see this across Africa, especially Nigeria and West Africa as well, it's just there's a talent gap. It's a new industry. Not many people are skilled to actually thrive or with the necessary skills to do it. So if you look at what are ways to cater to that, we try to train as much as possible, train our own staff, hire strictly Ghanaians to work in the market here, and then train them as well. And we think that goes a long way. So even contractors that work with us, we also try to train them so that not only one company does well, but the industry will grow if a lot of companies are training and giving back to the environment. Another policy that I think would be really, really helpful, one that people have spoken about a lot over the years, would be net metering, right? If you're able to adopt net metering, it's a further incentive for people to want to build and take on whether it's CapEx, whether it's anything, because you know it's a payback itself, right? And also potential incentives or subsidies for companies who are able to become carbon neutral, who reduce their emissions, or who take on energy storage, because then you're telling companies that we know it's expensive, but we want to support you for taking this bold step to support not only your company's targets, but also the target of the country as a whole, right? We know Ghana wants to be a leader in the sustainable space and also some of the commitments they make. So I think when you incentivize private companies, it's to make them go above and beyond their way to actually try to make that work. I hope those answer your question.
Yes, they do. Thank you so much, Victor. And you mentioned something, training who? I didn't get that part.
Training. So we try to train our staff and other contractors that we work with, right? So apart from just our staff, if we partner with other companies to develop a project, we make sure we train them in our standards, how we do it, because we get trainings from the OEMs internationally, but we also want to pass the knowledge, right? Because these same contractors will work with other companies. So we want to make sure that there's a uniform standard that's going around the market versus people complain that somebody installed a system that never worked.
Okay, thank you so much, Victor. I'm happy to hear that you applaud the current regulatory landscape, but then we know there's still more work to be done. Then so far, good. Thank you so much. I would move on to my next question now. Dr. Quansah, please, what innovative policy frameworks, I'm talking about investment strategies and cross-sector collaboration models, could you recommend to rapidly scale Ghana's clean energy infrastructure and drive a sustainable energy transformation?
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Yom. Now, when it comes to regulations, I think Ghana has a lot of them for our power sector. Some of us even think there are too many of them. But in the face of the changing energy landscape, one of the things that we need to take cognizance of is the importance of of distributed energy. By distributed energy, these energy systems that are scattered all over in small units, they are becoming so important, and we need to take a look at the regulation in that space. Much earlier on, I think after we passed the Renewable Energy Law in 2011, then came, some feed-in tariffs that were announced. Feed-in tariffs were designed to be generous enough to incentivize, micro investors to enter into the PV space. But as the global, experience showed, it was hardly sustainable, even for governments such as the German government. So then came, things like the net metering. We've had a net metering code since 2015, so it's almost 10 years now. But you can't point to much accomplishment of these, and the conversation is a bit difficult because the net metering, in the case of Ghana, is also happening at a time when you have capacity in excess of what you actually need and for which you're paying. But this, I should say, is a short-term challenge, which eventually we're going to overcome. So we need to pay attention to the distribution sector, right? And over there, let me point out that we understand the hesitation of the traditional distribution utilities. So if you allow Victor to do a lot more PV, it means their sales will be going down, right? But it's also important that we point out they understand, and we've been doing some work with them, that it's not in the strictest sense a revenue loss to them. Because if you look at how electricity is priced in Ghana for the distribution utility, what they get is what's called a distribution service charge. So now the PURC has actually structured the net metering arrangement in such a way that if you put in 1 unit, you don't get exactly 1 unit back. It's slightly less. So this is somehow to meet them halfway. So I think we should simply try and get the utilities along. That will open up the space significantly. In terms of policy frameworks, one of the things that are happening, with the EVs are coming in quite strongly. We don't have much, but the future, everything points to the fact that EVs are going to be very, very significant in the transport sector. So we are working currently with the Energy Commission to develop regulations for EV charging stations so that you can charge safely, and potential litigations and whatnot are anticipated in the policy and the regulation. So that's one of the things that would be clearly needed. And this is also linked to investment. We can later on talk about it, but let me pause at this point.
Thank you so much, David. I remember Victor mentioned that one of the operational challenges they experienced in the Ghanaian landscape had to do with the net metering, and you had mentioned that it was just something that is temporal and it's for a short period, and we could overcome it. So I'm happy to hear that. For the next part of our discussion, we are going to delve into how to engage stakeholders across critical sectors like public and private partnerships. I know we've mentioned some earlier, but then we'll delve right into this discussion and discuss how the PPPs can help drive Ghana's climate action. So I'll take the first question. We'll go to Dr. Kwanzaa again, then I'll come back to everybody else. Doc, how can cross-sector stakeholder engagement and collaborative strategies transform Ghana's clean energy landscape, bridging public and private sector efforts to accelerate meaningful climate actions? So, Doc, the question is yours now.
Thank you. Thanks, Elon. So it's interesting you bring this up because earlier, I think about 3 weeks ago, there was this event, forum workshop on renewable energy manufacturing in Ghana, supported by the SC Pro Secretariat in Vienna and the Energy Transition Office. It became very apparent that when the GIPC goes out to market the investment potential, people get interested, they come, and then suddenly they realize they are dealing with 10, 20 agencies who do not talk to each other. So my proposal, my suggestion would be that there are entities, there are activities that could be lumped, right? Those that can be lumped, let's lump them. And interagency collaboration. So for instance, is it possible that we can have, you don't have to go to the police yourself, you don't have to go to the EPA yourself, then you go to the Energy Commission, then you go to Lands Commission. Can we have, let's say maybe a desk? Yes, a one-stop shop, that holds your hand, right? You would need this document, you need that document, even if it's for a fee, right? You pay that fee so that it is not your duty. And this is particularly the case when it comes to foreign investors, but you'll be shocked that it's even worse in the case of local investors, right? So we would need that kind of thing. And another thing, we should be singing from the same, as they say, from the same hymn book. What is the goal? The goal is we want to make our energy system, energy sector resilient. We want to the climate, there's climate change. We want to embark on mitigation actions. We want to embark on adaptation and resilience actions. All agencies would have to now buy into this vision. So these are the thoughts that I would share. Maybe subsequently I can come in with additional thoughts. But we need to share the vision. We don't. One thing I almost forgot. There's also a turf war. There's a turf war which becomes apparent to you once you start engaging some of these entities. So as I said, having a common vision that everyone understands will probably minimize these turf wars. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I remember you mentioned something about collaboration, and I would like to speak more into that. And I'll call Victor to tell me what you think should be the specific collaborative platforms or incentive structures that would help bridge that gap between solar providers, traditional utilities, local financial institutions, and community leaders to accelerate Ghana's clean energy adoption while ensuring sustainable business models.
And just to make sure I got that right. So again, what are some of the incentives we can do just to foster the collaboration across the different agencies?
Exactly, that's correct.
Okay, so I think there's a few things that we can try to think about, right? I mean, for incentives, we spoke about some of them earlier. If you look at some of the tax exemptions you get, tax exemptions or duty exemptions, for instance, for the panels, if you can expand it to some of the larger items, so it doesn't need to be everything. Like for instance, some of the cable trays, cables, or steelwork that can be fabricated locally, you can leave those on there. But things like the inverters, the batteries, the panels that are not manufactured or assembled here, if you can take some of those exemptions, it makes it more affordable and it makes people want to onboard it quicker, right? Also look at the PPA regulations to see how you can foster more growth. Also, you can take a page from some of the other markets, right? Like I know in Nigeria, there's a dedicated rural electrification agency that manages a good amount of funds from the World Bank. We're talking hundreds of millions of dollars in grants to help boost some of those projects, right? If you foster some of those projects here, it goes a long way. Because then what you're thinking of is the private sector works on a lot of the bigger private individuals, but at the same time, you have an agency with grants and cheaper funding to actually help the rural areas. And again, the key aim here is you want to grow adoption. You want to grow widespread. You want to go to the northern region. As some of those projects are expensive, how do you convince a developer to go there and invest their money? They're not sure of the returns. So those type of programs, they work multi-dimensional, right? Because the public sector is involved, private sector is involved, training is involved, you're creating new jobs as well. At the same time, you're fostering electricity access. So off the top of my head, those are some of the key things. I do know that there are some renewable energy collaborative groups as well. So it's to see how are their voices heard more, right? And last but not least, let's see what else we can do in terms of setting more aggressive targets on generation, either to the ECG, to the different utilities? How do you incentivize or motivate them to get more power from cleaner sources or from solar, right? A lot of times, one of the big things you need to work on is how do you change the ship? You don't want different parties to look at themselves as competitors, but look at themselves as collaborators. We all want the same results, right? We all want to foster energy access. We all want sustainability targets. We want to reduce our emissions. So how do you incentivize them to take more power from one source without affecting their business, especially if you look at the different grid triples we've had this year? So I think if you bring all of those together, you get something that works, right? I don't think we have one answer that solves everything, but it's a mix of incentivizing the clients, the private companies, the utilities, and then also thinking about those in the rural areas as well. How do we get to them? And how can we mobilize international funding to come and make this more accessible? And last but not least, the human capital to make sure you're constantly training and providing jobs as well.
Thank you, Victor. Like you rightly said, collaboration is key, and the goal is energy sector resilience. So it's good we all work together to achieve that. I would be moving on to Thomas now. Thomas, we've heard about collaboration. We've actually heard about incentives. Can you tell us what concrete mechanisms Ghana could implement to better align with government ministries? And I remember earlier you talked about multilateral, the development banks, and then private sector actors. I'm asking you how Ghana what mechanisms we could implement to better align with government ministries and then the international development banks and private sector actors in creating a cohesive clean energy marketplace, particularly in areas like streamlined permitting, risk guarantees, and coordinated policy implementation.
Thank you very much, Amma, for the question. So maybe before I address the question, I just wanted to say that I think, like all the other speakers have said, Ghana has, I think we've done quite a bit. We've done quite well in terms of improving clean energy access in the country. We know about the AFAWA and SunRef and all of these other initiatives. So I think Ghana has done quite well, especially with the Energy Commission championing most of these initiatives, and also the Ministry of Environment. But then to address your question directly, I think it comes down to the same issues the other speakers just spoke about, collaboration and partnership, but then it's about how you try to initiate that or the governance around that. So maybe I'll just share an example from what we have done with our NDC Action Project. So we set up a policy working group, which is made up of stakeholders from all the key sectors which are important to what we are doing. So we are working on two priority sectors, e-mobility and then also solar power irrigation. So when it comes to e-mobility, we have all the players from Ministry of Energy, Energy Commission, Ministry of Transport, and all the other players, and even the Ghana Automotive Industry Authority under the Ministry of Trade, and all of these key partners that are. So I think those kinds of mechanisms are what would help create that kind of needed collaboration and partnership, because then when they are all sitting together at the table, it makes it easier for them to streamline, because everybody knows what each other is doing, and then they're able to influence the policy on each side. So I think that's such a mechanism, multi-stakeholder mechanism, would be very important. But then apart from that, in the area of the financing, already there are some initiatives going on, because we know about, for example, for agriculture, we know about the Ghana incentive-based risk sharing for agricultural lending, GESAP, which is providing a guarantee for agri financing to commercial banks. So it's more like a wholesale financing risk guarantee arrangement. So I think something like that can be expanded, because I think for now, most of the people who have benefited are mainly commercial farmers. But maybe if they can expand such a very good initiative to include more of the smallholder farmers, because their risk perception is very high and they would need more of such guarantees. So something like that could also be very helpful. And then also another thing I also wanted to mention is the role of the NDPC, the National Development Planning Commission. I think NDPC should be playing a bigger role in all of these issues, especially cross-cutting issues like climate change. How are we leveraging the role of a mandate of NDPC to be able to ensure that all these agencies are talking together to each other, especially from the public sector perspective? And then the other thing will be the digitalization. How are we also leveraging the digitalization to champion this cause? Because the world we are in now is about AI and all of this other stuff. How are we ensuring that I don't have to go and spend so much time at the Registrar General's office before I can get a license, or I don't go and spend so much time at the Energy Commission before I can get certified to bring in solar panels and stuff like that. So I think those are the things I think we should be working on. But I mean, the country has done well, but we can do more. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Thomas. I actually agree that we need to improve our multi-stakeholder mechanisms, and then so that we get an enhanced grassroots participation to ensure that communities are not only beneficiaries, but actually the key drivers to achieve climate action goals. In this case, it will no longer be top-bottom, it's rather a bottom-up approach.
Exactly.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Thank you so much, Thomas. So I will be taking the final remarks from my esteemed panelists. But then I would like to say, Dr. Quansah, I'll start with you. And I just got the wind that you're actually a professor now. So congratulations. I'll come to you, Professor Quansah, shortly. But then I will take a closing remarks from Victor first, and then move over to Thomas and to you, Professor Quansah, who will wrap it all up for us.
Perfect. I would say for closing remarks, a lot of progress has happened over the last decade, right? In the last 5 to 10 years, there's been lots of growth in the industry and a lot of wins to celebrate. But I think we're just starting, all right? I think we're still at infancy stage. I think there's still a lot more to be done. And I think we are getting there. In global industry, we're seeing improvements in the pricing. We're seeing more business models, and we're seeing more players in the market that are able to put in more skin in the game and able to take off some of the bottlenecks to make it easier. Technology is also advancing rapidly, so we can continue to leverage that. But at the end of the day, any sustainable long-term efforts and any large impact we need to have can't just be led by one or two companies. You need the private sector as a whole to collaborate, work together. You need the public sector to come in for a wider reach. And then you need formal regulations and policies to actually fuel that growth, right? So I think you create the enabling environment, and then you allow private companies, public companies as well, like to run with it. I think we're getting there. So again, a lot to celebrate. We've mentioned some of the things that happened. It's just to now see how do we go from just talking the talk or coming on panels to say what's going on to how do we get the right people in the audience and the room that actually are ready to take things forward, right? And then see some of the changes that we're looking for. But I do think from a Daystar perspective, we are invested in Ghana long term. We are looking to see how we can continue to grow the industry here and support Ghanaians and Ghanaian businesses in their transition to renewable energy. Thank you for having me again.
Thank you so much, Victor. Thank you. Those are really, really great words, and that's a call to action. Thank you. We'll not just talk, we'll actually implement everything we have said here. I would like to take your closing remarks now, Thomas.
Okay. Thank you very much for the opportunity. I think it's been a very insightful discussion from listening to everybody on the panel. What I want to say is the climate issue, it's an energy issue mainly. So until we are able to really address the issues around energy and the energy transition, we are not going to make much progress. And for that to happen, three things will have to align: the climate, the technology issues, and also the financing issue has to be in sync. Otherwise, we are not going to really see much happening. So I think with the climate issue, we've all come to understand the science is established. And with the technology, there's still some gap, but with the support of organizations like UNEP, that is being addressed. But then the financing is still a challenge, and I believe we are working towards that as well. So hopefully those three things can align at a point, and then we can transition as a country. So I just want to say thank you to you as well, Amma, for the excellent job we've done this evening, and also to my other panelists. And hopefully the conversation will not end here, but we can move from the talk to action, and we all be better off at the end of the day. So yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Thomas. Professor Quansah?
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Amma, and also thanks to Next Year for the invitation. When I read the notes that you shared with us, what excited me is that I think you had sustainable development in the proper perspectives. So there is economic development, which is important. There is environmental sustainability, which is very important, as well as the social dimension. So I would conclude by saying that for a country that is still, making its way up, we should understand our context very well. So when we're doing taking any decisions on technology options, technology choices, we must understand first of all that we need to power our economic development, and that the most resilient energy system is one that is diversified, that is well diversified. So in that sense, we should not hold ourselves hostage to one technology or the other, and that feeds directly into the question of data and bankability. So which combination of technologies give you the best cost for you to power your economy. So for us in the university, we are happy to collaborate with you, happy to collaborate with colleagues here to provide answers to these questions on an ongoing basis. So thanks also to my panelists. I've learned a lot. For us who teach, we always are looking for opportunity to learn and transfer. So I've learned a lot. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Prof. Thank you, everyone. So from my end, I would like to say, as we draw this enlightening session to a close, I would like to extend my heartfelt gratitude to all distinguished panelists for their meaningful and insightful contributions, and to everybody that participated in this important dialogue. Today, we've explored Ghana's path towards a clean energy future, discussing not only the challenges, but also the immense opportunities that lie ahead. We've gained actionable insights on how to accelerate our energy transition, the critical role of public-private partnership, and the necessity of inclusive grassroots participation in achieving our climate action goals. My key takeaways from this session include the urgent need for robust policy frameworks that enable access to climate finance and support for technological innovation. 2, transformative potential of renewable energy solutions like solar systems when coupled with energy storage and reliable grid integration. My third takeaway is the pivotal role of stakeholders, governments, private sector actors, and communities in driving collaborative effort towards sustainable energy, and also leveraging technology for our benefit to power our economic development. As we mentioned earlier, Ghana stands at a crossroad of critical transition. So we believe that by aligning our strategies with global best practices, fostering innovation and technology, and ensuring that no one is left behind, we can truly drive climate action and secure a resilient, sustainable future for generations to come. And to my dear listeners, I would like to encourage all of us to continue the conversation started here and work collaboratively to implement the ideas shared today. Together, we can light up Ghana in a way that not only powers our homes and industry, but also safeguards our environment. Thank you once again for your engagement, and special thanks to Electricity Hub team for organizing this impactful event. Let's move forward with determination and unity to empower Ghana's future through clean energy solutions. I have Ninola on standby. Ninola, I would like to take your closing words now.
Everyone, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. This was a very beautiful session. Thank you, Yom, for that beautiful outro. I really loved it. Yes, we're all here together to empower Ghana's future. I think one thing that stood out to me was that collaboration is key in this energy sector, and we definitely have to work together to empower Ghana's future. Thank you to our panelists for coming up, for showing up, and to all our participants who are going to watch this webinar. Thank you for watching, and thank you for being here today. Good night and have a beautiful evening. Thank you.